Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jordan and today's video is a bit different than my usual content, which speaking of, I do have a couple videos in the works that I'm really excited about. I've just been super busy. If you're a regular here, as I'm sure you can tell, I have moved, which took a lot of time and energy, but we'll be back to some book content very soon. In the meantime though, I wanted to release this conversation that I had with the actor Kit Young for my podcast because, as some of you might know, but many of you won't, I'm a film student. While I love talking about books, my passion is film, and I had the opportunity to talk to Kit about his acting process and working on Shadow and Bone, his history with acting, theater versus film, and some advice for young filmmakers and actors who want to be a part of this incredible industry. So without further ado, I just wanted to do a little introduction to let you know about this podcast that I have, and to let you know what this kind of special episode is going to be. But I really hope you enjoy my conversation with Kit. I found it to be incredibly inspiring, and and I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to Film Kid Asks, the podcast where I ask questions to working professionals in the film industry from the perspective of someone just getting started. My name is Jordan, and today I'm joined by Kit Young, an actor who has worked on many impressive theater projects as well as the hit Netflix show Shadow and Bone. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Kit.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So you are a member of the Abingdon Film Unit, which allows students to make documentary, narrative, and animated films under the guidance of industry professionals. How was your experience there?
Yeah, wow, you've done your deep dive research. Because that was the Abingdon Film Unit was like a school club in my high school, and it was something that we would do on like Wednesday afternoons. And at first, it was just for me, it was just something that it was a great use of my time because it distracted me, and it was creative. And I started making animations, and then I kind of helped out with some of the documentary things that were being made. And they're all students from 13 to 18, so some of the projects are clever and lovely, and some of them are just not. So there's a real kind of mix of ideas. But what I think you do end up learning quite quickly is what works and what doesn't work, and the stories that are worth telling are the ones that connect with us, both as creators and as an audience. And arguably every story is worth telling, but it's about the execution and how you finesse your storytelling, how you finesse the kind of filmmaking. And especially in the industry, one of the things you don't really learn in school is that everything is about time and everything's about money. So the restrictions that you're working in mean that you're far more ruthless with yourself in terms of what choices you make, and hopefully you're making the best choice to get the to get the best result as well.
Yeah, of course. And then you also studied at the Royal Academy of Drama Arts, where you got your Bachelor of Arts. How was
Mm-hmm.
your schooling experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. That was RADA is arguably one of the kind of it's got one of the kind of most illustrious reputations in the world in terms of actor training and theatre as a whole. You go to an institution that's over 100 years, you know that there's some good stuff that's come before. And I remember when I went there to audition, just seeing all the faces of the people that had been there, actors that I've admired, and it's quite daunting. And especially with it being a Royal Academy, it's got the Queen's approval. So there's a lot you're walking into. But I auditioned, and I was fortunate enough to be given a place, and I was there. I moved away from home. I grew up in Oxfordshire, and I moved to London for the first time to go there. And so it was a big step in terms of life experience, let alone training full time to be an actor. And it's a very rigorous and very intense process. You really there's 28 people in a year, or at least there were when I was there. And, you're really with this group of people for 3 years. And for me, I'd done a lot of acting and dancing and singing and playing music as I grew up. I did all the kind of school societies and extracurricular stuff, and obviously did some professional jobs as a kid. But that's the time when it really changes from a hobby into your job, into your profession. And having, you have these really guilty moments, because being an actor is one of the greatest things in the world. It's one of the greatest jobs. You're employed to pay and entertain people. to play and entertain people. Sorry, and there are definitely other things that I could be doing that are so different from this, and so you do feel a bit of guilt when you go, oh, I don't really feel like doing any acting today because it's Tuesday. I don't feel like it. But it's from the moment we go, no, there's a job to do, and people have turned up, they've paid to come and see this show, or they've decided to click on this thing on Netflix or whatever it is, and it's your job to deliver. And I think that was a big learning curve for me, as well as really learning what it is to create and kind of really fit into a role and what that really means, and to really realize that all of this stuff, it doesn't matter what field you're working in, all of this stuff is collaborative, and it's always a big team effort. The amount of people that are working on a film production, be it a low budget one, is more people than you'll see necessarily on the day when you're shooting. So the amount of hard work that goes in from every department, it's my job to turn up and do the best that I can every single day. And that was one of the big learning curves when I was at drama school, but I had a great time. It's a remarkable process.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think there's this kind of misconception, especially in North America, that you don't need training as an actor, that you can
Right.
just step
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
So I do think it's always good to hear from actors who have had this kind of more rigorous training talk about those experiences, because I think that's important. Is there anything that you would have changed about your schooling or training at all?
I think one of the things, and I think it has changed since I've left. I mean, one of the great things about these institutions is that they do shift and change a lot quite quickly. But with that said, slightly contradictory statement following, a place like RADA has such a great lineage of students and of alumni and teachers and just everything that's being taught there. And so part of the pride and part of the package when you arrive at a place like RADA is that you are going to be given the same tools that Anthony Hopkins was given, that John Gielgud and all of these like legends from before have done. But the industry that I'm walking into is going to be vastly different from what it was when they were coming out, right? So there are some things that were invaluable and still will be, and some teachings that I probably won't really fully understand for the next 10, 20 years, maybe. It takes a while for the penny to drop with some of these things. But for instance, I was coming up and self-taping and taping for roles and sending it off into the abyss and hoping that someone might give you a job. That was quite a new thing. I mean, it had been around, but largely you'd go in and you'd meet someone and then you put yourself onto tape. I'm still terrible at self-tapes. I hate them because I basically think if I can go in and charm them into liking me before I inevitably read it poorly, then I'm already a leg up. Because, quite often with an audition, you have no time at all to get your head around all of this stuff. And, with a play, you're doing at least a month of rehearsal. So, it's all about, the thing that is really helpful is that you're taught to be adaptable and to go with each given situation and kind of find your own route through it. And the great thing is that whether you've been to drama school or not, whether you've had a British kind of acting education or a American one or wherever you are in the world, there's no set way. I mean, every job I've done, I've worked with people who've had entirely different journeys into this. And the only thing that matters is that they're able to do the job required. And 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, pretty much, that is a success. Everyone ends up doing the job. But I think the tricky thing with some of these institutions is that you kind of staying on the ball with the changes that are happening in the industry. For instance, now drama schools are probably having a really massive issue with COVID because they can't get people in for auditions. You have to do auditions via Zoom. And if that's a theatre training, you're largely actually auditioning screen actors because that's how we're communicating. And so the way in which we teach the next generation constantly has to shift. And I think that's the big struggle with these institutions that feel like pillars of the industry.
Yeah, of course. So kind of jumping to the beginning of your career, you started mostly performing in theater. You did a couple of TV movies and things, but the vast majority of your career thus far has been performing in theater. So how has that influenced your approach to preparation? Because obviously you have much more rehearsal time than in film and TV. And is there anything that has informed the way that you think about performance that you've kind of brought with you into the world of film and television?
Yeah, I mean, at first, I think theatre is very easy to mentally get on board with for any newcomer. It's pretty self-explanatory. The audience will turn up at this time. They have paid money to be here. You have to have the show ready. 3, 2, 1, go. And you have to be ready to do the show in order every night. The job doesn't change in that respect. Whereas with film and television, it's constantly shifting because you read the script. You're not necessarily shooting everything in order. You normally are not shooting things in order. You're shooting things in a variety of locations that you may not see until the day of. You might not meet your scene partner until moments before someone says action. And quite often, especially in television, it happens in film as well, but especially with television, the script is somewhat a guideline. And I don't want to, I'm not saying anything to the discredit of the writers, but it's just that things change very, very quickly. Obviously, the big beats of the plot and a lot of the plot threads will be consistent from months and months before, but there'll be line changes. So just that thing of going, oh, I know my lines, is already questionable because those things can shift and change. And I think for me, because the job with theatre is that you can't, at least the way that I do a play is I know the entirety of the play. I don't mean I know everyone's lines. I just know that through rehearsal, you learn the show. And so when you're on, if I'm off for a scene, I know exactly how long I have before I'm going back on. So I'm deciding, if I'm going to go get a cup of coffee, or if I'm going to step outside for a bit of fresh air, or if I'm like, do I have enough time to pop to the loo? Like, exactly how the show runs, which means that with film, I think you have to treat the script in the same way, or at least I do, in that when I know the script, I know exactly when someone goes, oh yeah, this is the scene when this happens, but you've already shot your death. And this is the first time you meet the person who will kill you. So you need to kind of be able to piece all these things together. And, luckily everyone is in the same boat. So if you've got a great director and you have a fantastic writing team and you've got all the ADs that are kind of supporting you, that process is made easier. But there's a bit more kind of foresight that I think actors need when kind of walking into scenarios where you go, when in the story are we? Because those are pretty unique challenges, I think, to film, because when you watch it, it's normally seamless, and you'd be quite surprised most often to hear that, oh yeah, we especially with a trilogy, you go, if they shoot movies together, you'd be like, yeah, so we did the climax of movie 3 before these characters met in movie 2, and you'd be like, how do you do that? And so I think the theatre background has helped with that, because you end up having to look at the entire beast before kind of diving in.
Yeah, that actually perfectly leads into, I had a question about how you kind of orient yourself in the material when you're shooting out of order. So I imagine a lot of that is to do with, communication with the director and guidance, seeking guidance from them and your scene partners. Yeah. But what are some of the challenges? Like, I imagine, jumping in first thing to like an emotional scene and then having to pull yourself out of that for something completely different next. Yeah. Do you want to talk me through a little bit more about how you kind of, I don't know if you conceptualize it like more logically in your head, or how do you deal with that?
There's a lot of trust that I think actors have to put in the creatives, in the big dogs who are making all the decisions. First of all, they have taken a punt on you. They have bestowed trust in you, being like, we think that you're the right person to do the job. And so you have to take that kind of badge of honor and run with that. And I think I definitely have a certain sense of gratitude that, oh, you gave me a job, lovely, I will therefore do my best. That's the bottom line, really. But I think one of the really tricky things in terms of not knowing how these things are going to run, I mean, you look at something like Shadow and Bone, we didn't even have all of the scripts as once before we started shooting. So you could read the book and know what happens in the first book. But for myself, Freddie and Amita, who are playing the crows in the show, if anyone's watched it, we're not in that first book. It's unique to the show putting us in that. So we had genuinely no idea what we were going to do. And we were like, so how long have we all known each other? And we kind of had to develop those conversations. We'd always be like, so genuinely, what is happening next? Because is this thing going to affect that thing later? And you just kind of have to have those discussions. And what's quite funny is, nobody trusts actors with information. There's a very good reason why. Actors are often the ones that leak stuff because they're the ones that are asked. I mean, no one's necessarily doing press junkets with the second assistant of X department, because our faces are all over the place, people want to talk to actors about it. And actors are involved so heavily because they were there that they have all the answers, which is why Marvel don't give their actors all of the scripts. And we've all seen with people like Mark Ruffalo or Tom Holland that they just leak everything. And so sometimes that can get frustrating because they don't tell you stuff because they don't want you to spoil it. And you go, no, but it'll be really nice to know, because if I don't know, I don't know how to do this scene. And so it's always a discussion. And sometimes you've actually got to just, sorry, I think there's sirens in the background. Sorry, sometimes you just got to kind of shut your mouth and go, well, clearly you're not telling me because I don't need to know. And I can fulfill what you need today for this segment. And it is your greater job as a creative to piece it all together. My job today is to stand in the right place, say the words, and get out of the way. But you know, that's quite a hard thing. That's a hard piece of your own kind of power to relinquish. Sometimes you have to surrender yourself to the process and then know when to pick up the baton and take your moment and when to give off to another actor. It's kind of echoing what I said before about it all being collaborative. Everything has to be a discussion. Things don't work when people don't talk about things, actually. Applies to relationships too.
Yeah, that is fair enough. So I wanted to ask one more kind of comparative question about film and TV versus theater, and that is how you approach, because obviously character, it's very different in film and theater where, you know, the entire character arc for the most part will happen within the one project, whereas in TV it's a much more, it's a slower progression, I guess, for your character. So how do you kind of approach that and making sure that your character is progressing? I'm sure a lot of it is the writing, but how do you kind of conceptualize that in your head and work on the kind of character arc when you're shooting out of sequence and for this kind of extended period of time?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think largely some of it is guesswork, at least at the beginning. No one is going to tell you how to do it because they probably don't know the answer. They have another job. They have to do other things. So they're focusing on doing that thing. And it's only my job to work that out, really. I can ask for help, but it's my job to get that done. And I think, you know, the first time you do it is just always going to be guesswork. It's a big, you learn through trial and error with this type of work. And I've been very fortunate with Shadow and Bone, as that's been my only experience of doing like a series, in that I could always go back to the book and go, what are the essential, you know, qualities of this character, this pre-established role that I need to echo, which brings a different kind of pressure, because then there's the sense of, oh God, I've got to get it right, because people have a preconceived notion of who this guy should be. But I remember there was one week where we were shooting, because we shot in blocks. So we had one director who did 2 episodes. And so, you know, we had one director who did episodes 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and 5 and 6. And I remember we had like reshoots for block 1 at some point, and pretty much within the space of a week, I just finished all my scenes in it. I'd finished episode 2. So I had to go do my final scene of episode 1. The following days, I was doing most of my scenes in episodes 3 and 4, had to do a pickup for 6 and then go back to 2. And I was like, what? And to some extent, you just rely on other departments. I was like, which costume am I in? That will tell me when we are in the story. And on another level, you know, I was just massively supported by my fellow actors, and that there were times where one of us would be like, sorry, what's going on? And the other 2 would have the answer. On the whole, we all knew what was going on, because you just need to go through the script and find your way. It's a huge puzzle that kind of needs to be put together. Some of it by you, some of it by other people. And so it's just trusting that you're giving enough that they can work with. And they go, great, that will fit with that, and that will fit with that, and we're going to do it all like this. And the other thing with TV and film is that some of that will change after you've left, because I thought I'd given a pretty cohesive, consistent performance over 6 months in 8 episodes. And then creative decisions shift a bit once they start putting everything together. And months after I've stopped, they're shifting this and moving that. And then I see the cut and I go, that doesn't make sense to me because of how I remember it. But if you look at it objectively, you go, oh, that makes complete sense. Or you go, how could you cut that scene? This thing won't make sense. And you go, oh, no, actually, it makes more sense. And it's just kind of knowing that my own OCD of my own process isn't necessarily the only way it can work. And just knowing that it isn't my job to create everything on my own. It's my job to be a collaborator. And sometimes I might get it wrong. And if I get it wrong, hopefully someone's going to point me in the right direction. And for the most part, everyone works towards the same goal. So that whole kind of headache of trying to piece it all together is made easier by other people going, yeah, this is just how it goes. We're all figuring it out, really.
Yeah. It is hard to relinquish control though, especially creatively when you feel so,
Yeah.
invested in a performance or in the
Mm,
project or whatever. So I would like to jump to Shadow and Bone a little bit. I have a couple
sure.
questions specific to that. So yeah, as you mentioned, your role serves as a kind of prequel to what is actually in the books. So I am
Yeah.
curious how you approached crafting a performance that stays true to who that character is while adapting to the changes that come with, bringing the book to screen or in your case, not the book, but, creating a kind of prequel
Yes.
story.
Yeah. I mean, we were all a bit in the dark when we arrived in Budapest because we've been given the first two episodes, or rather, everyone else had except for me because I was a very last minute addition, and so I read all the books, and I had a lot to work with because they're fantastically written, and the characters, especially in Six of Crows, the books that we're taking from, not adapting right now, those characters are so vividly drawn, and so that made things a lot easier. But actually, I think just across the board, the show is cast brilliantly. I think everyone is such a brilliant fit for their roles, which makes my job easier because all I have to do on the day, once I'm in the costume, sat in the Crow Club with Freddie playing Kaz and Amita playing Inej, is go, oh look, there's Kaz and Inej. I guess I'll be Jesper then. And all I have to do is fit with what they're doing, and then we're kind of off to a winner. That said, the bit that you don't see is all of the amazing writing that goes on, all of the discussions around how they're going to make that work, them telling you this is how it's going to work. So then my job is to go, oh, cool. I think I can do that. And I think there were just certain things from the book that were great to build up to. So for instance, I remember talking with Eric, our showrunner, and he said, this Jesper that we're meeting at the beginning of season one is more naive, is he has less of an attention span, and he's got all of that kind of that quirky wit that he has, but he's just not as streetwise yet. And I was like, great. I think my own sense of inadequacy at the fact that you've chosen me to come and do this thing can just feed into the role then, because it was made so much easier by everything else that was going on. I got to literally walk into Ketterdam. Like, for me, it was real. It was literally around me. They built all of it. It's not just a bunch of CG. Like, we had a bunch of people walking around in the fog and all of that stuff. And so all I had to do was go, here's a page of Six of Crows. Here's what it says about the character. This, and this is done because it's all around me. So all I have to do is do this little thing today. And I can do that little thing tomorrow. I do that thing the next day. And gradually over time, what you've done is you've built a character. I think it was about taking pressure off myself because it was already pressure enough to become the greatest gunslinger in the world. I didn't really know how to do that, but I think I think one of they were like quotes. They were character quotes that other people say about Jesper, and that's another theatre thing actually. People making lists when building a character, what your character says in the play, what they say about themselves, what they say about other people, what other people say about them. And I really went for that last list, what other people say about Jesper. And that gives you a sense of objectivity, but also you need the other side to know how he operates. And I think when you put those things together, you go, oh, great, there's a character. My job is to just jump in. And I think we did a pretty good job of it.
I
So
think
I'm
you did
glad.
great. Yeah, no,
Thank you.
I was blown away by your performance when I watched the show. I was really, really impressed. So I am obviously a lot of people who listen to this podcast are aspiring crew members or,
Hmm.
directors want to be more
Yeah.
on that side of the fence. So I have a couple questions kind of more from that perspective.
Fab.
What makes a great relationship with a director for you?
I think every director I've worked with has been incredibly different. And I think that's really, really great because one of the appeals of this entire job is variety. I'm not interested in just doing one genre. I would like to jump around and do something light and then something dark. And so because of that, you really meet a range of personalities. Being the director, I have so much respect for every director I've worked with because their job is pretty hard. The time commitment from beginning to end, it's like a 3-act story being a director. And as an actor, I'm only part of the second bit, which is production itself, at least as a, as a mainstay. And I think directors need to obviously have their creative eye. They need to kind of surround themselves with the best team, get your first AD who you trust, get your DOP. And that's like a little triumvirate of power on the day. And like these 3 people, when they work together brilliantly, everything works smoothly. The only thing that will ever get in your way is other people having a particular type of issue. But if those 3 things are all working together, you have a functioning set for the most part, and the working day can happen. Because one is on time, one is on the shot, and hopefully the director is tying everything together that also, brings in story. And I think a brilliant director is someone who can largely work with the technical and also can really work with their actors in terms of story and provide options and go, you know what, we did that version. You want to try that version? Because remember we talked about it? Yeah, you try that version. And I go, oh, great, I'll get a chance to play that one. Even if he doesn't use it, and he's like, great, we have options here. You're giving me this, and actually I just need this one thing. And no matter how specific it is, I could do the same line 40 times. And that might make me feel like I'm a terrible actor because I'm like, oh, I'm clearly not getting it right. But if that's what you need, and I understand that that's what it is, and it's not just that you're going, yeah, you're just a bit rubbish, then as long as we understand why we're doing what we're doing for the most part, then I'm willing to kind of do it all. I was doing a film at the end of last year in the north of Scotland. We were so far north that there was basically no other people around. And we were on the side of mountains and in the woods and on beaches in the rain and the wind. It was crazy weather and it felt quite dangerous. But everyone who was running it knew what they were doing. So when they were like, Kit, can you climb the mountain with one hand because your other hand has a spear and you're covered in blood and you're dressed in fur and all this kind of madness stuff, I was like, yeah, this seems like a bad idea, but I can do this. And I think we're all going to be okay. And you know what? It worked. We got some good footage and it will be in the film. And I think it's just trusting that they know what they're doing. And if they don't know what they're doing, ask for help. Get people around you who can support you. The amount of directors who I've worked with who work with the same team like year after year, I go, there's a reason for that. They know how to work together and create the thing that they want to make.
Yeah. So what would you say is important for crew members to understand about the acting process to make your job a little bit easier on set?
I think one of the things is that people are very good about giving actors a little bit of space, but sometimes that can get into blurred lines. So for instance, let's say that we're shooting in -6 degrees. Sorry, I'm talking Celsius. I don't really know what that is in Fahrenheit, but like, let's say it's really cold, below freezing, and you're all outside and we're going to be outside all day. So you are going to be really, really cold by the end of the day. There's no way to stop this. You are just going to freeze. But the actors are in t-shirts because that's what the scene is, and we're shooting a scene that is set in the summer. There's a certain like initial, I think, respect that goes both ways of like, gosh, your job is hard today. So is yours. And that's great. But I think also one of the other things is if you don't give the actors like a little bit of space to do what they need to do today, we're just going to be here for longer because we've got to get it done. And we might be running out of daylight. I think there's a natural bit of space, but the tricky thing with that is that then you get into that what I think is bollocks and bullshit is that thing of people going like, the actors need space, so I can't say hello to you. Like, that's nonsense. Like, I will go around and say hello to everyone because we're all here working towards the same thing. You could be, you could be working for one day, or you could be with us for the whole stint. It doesn't matter what your job is. Obviously, there are people I'm going to have closer contact with. I'm always going to say hello to, the makeup team and the costume department every day because they're literally making me look like what I need to look like. But at the same time, I don't want to work on a team where I don't say hello to the focus puller. We're all working together on this thing. We should all really know each other by the end of it. And so I think it's just it's on actors as well. Actors' jobs are obvious. Like, we turn up, we're in a ridiculous costume. You know what we're there for. Whereas I see a mass of people in puffer jackets and beanies, and now COVID masks. I can't necessarily tell who's the second camera assistant, or who's a crowd AD, or who's a runner, unless you introduce yourself to me or me to you. It's a massive crew, but everyone has a very specific job. And so I think it's about breaking down those barriers and meeting people and being like, oh, okay, cool, you do that, cool, good to know. And then by the end of it, you have a collaborative atmosphere where everyone is actually working together. The only other thing that often gets annoying is people doing the clapperboard really loudly when your face is here. Just don't. Other than that, everyone's normally really, really lovely and really great, and we have a good time. Like, we all know that we're having a great time making this stuff, so let's do that.
All right, yeah. No need to shoot the actors' nerves right before the take.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask one more question before I open it up to everyone else, because I think this is kind of a good one. As student filmmakers, I think working with actors is maybe the most daunting thing. We learn a lot in film school about the technical, the cameras and the sound, and a lot of the times we work with each other at first. So when you kind of make the leap to working with actors, it is scary as hell, because you don't necessarily have the vocabulary or a very deep understanding of the craft yet. So what advice would you give to young filmmakers when it comes to working with actors and directing actors? And is there anything that they should absolutely not do?
I think it's a very good question, actually. I think probably also recognize, okay, well, if you're a student director and the first actor you're working with is, a mega movie star, this is going to be different. But let's assume that you're also working with young up and coming actors, right? Assume that they are basically just as nervous and unsure as you are. Because actually, one of the other things about acting is often you guys have all the terminology that we don't understand. Like, I remember there was a whole thing where I kept saying to an actor over the course of 2 days, there was a scene where I was drinking a lot of liquid. I was like, I'm just going to go 10-1. And everyone was just like, why is everyone saying Kit's going 10-1? And everywhere I go, people are on the cans just letting them know that obviously I'm walking away or I'm coming back. And it's like, Kit's doing this, Kit's doing that, Kit's doing that. And this guy's going, what's 10-1? Shouting it. And everyone's laughing because they're like, yeah, Kit's going to the toilet. That's what it is. We just don't want to shout that because it's embarrassing. And I was like, there's so many things that we have to learn on the job that you've got in reverse as crew, because we don't get all the terminology. But also, there are quite a lot of crew who haven't necessarily read the script or read the latest version. And so, you kind of go, oh yeah, you're this guy, you're the bad guy in this thing. Cool, we got it. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not necessarily going to have an in-depth conversation about the script with the grip, because I'm going to assume he's not interested. He might be, or they might be, but I'm going to assume they probably aren't. And I think it's just that thing of, if you're starting out with actors, start with story, because that's why they're there. They're there to fulfill a specific part of your vision, regardless of the size of that, whether they're, the lead in it all the way through or they're there for a day. They're there to take part. And so I think it's about welcoming people in and giving them some sort of lay of the land of this is what we're trying to do with this, or this is where we're going to go, or this is kind of the rough plan. Also, actors, myself included, are very annoying to second ADs because they're normally the first port of call where we're like, so do you know what we're shooting? Can we get a one-line schedule? I would love to know which scenes I'm doing first, so I know which lines to learn first. Actors are often in the dark, so clue them in and be like, yeah, well, this is the plan. You don't have to tell them everything, but just be like, yeah, no, oh gosh, yeah, that scene, we're not actually going to shoot it at Waterfall anymore. We're actually going to do it in studio, but wait till you see it. This is the stuff we want to know, because all we have is what looks like a bunch of telegrams on a piece of paper. We haven't seen the rest of it. So kind of bring us into your world, and then, the rest should be quite simple, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end it off as well. So now I'm going to open it up to a few of my friends.
As an actor, as an artist, going into this industry, I think there's often a lot of doubt, as to, oh, this is never going to make me money. This is what I love doing. I'm so grateful that I have an opportunity to do this as a career, but long term, longevity. There's just so much unsurety and doubt, I think, is a good word for it. And what I want to know is in those moments of doubt, what got you through it? What got you through that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Jay. Yeah, I mean, that's still something that freaks me out. I call it the void. Like, I'm always scared of the oncoming void, which is like when your training's ending or your job is ending. You can feel it coming. You can feel the end. And I think every job feels like you're leaving high school again. Like, it's kind of like, oh, when am I going to see these people? And like it feels like you're losing more than just employment. And we're continually as actors in this cycle of saying hello and goodbye to people. And I think that applies to the entire industry, really. But I think especially with actors, it's quite visceral, because we really have to connect with people and then we just disappear. And that's a really bizarre thing. And so when you do kind of finish a job and you get the post-job blues, where suddenly you have nothing to do and it's like lockdown, like there's no obligation for you to get out of bed. And you're like, oh, maybe I should go and brush my teeth. Like, you can really go there. And so times like that, and especially like, honestly, if money's always going to be a concern, because some jobs pay really well and some jobs really don't. And that doesn't equate to your enjoyment of what that job is. It's just all different. And I'm sure you're not specifically, but just for the people listening, don't get into acting if you're getting in it for the money. Do something else. Like, there are other money things. Go be a corporate tycoon if you can do that. But like, yeah, it's a big fear. So it's in those times when you're not working, it's about kind of feeding that creative, insatiable hunger that you might have of like, I want to be doing stuff, I want to be making stuff, I want to be in stuff. And I think some people do really well when it's writing. I've dabbled. I've also been very lucky in that even when I've not been working, I'm knowing that there's something that might be around the corner. And so you just kind of hold out hope. But I think the key thing is, especially some of these jobs can take you away from home. And if they do, it's about connecting with the people that are important in life. Go home and spend time with your family. Like, actually spend time with them, because if you do get a lovely opportunity that takes you away, you don't know how long you'll be away for. And you don't want to lose contact with the really important people in your lives, whether it's your friends, your family, your partner, whatever it is. And so I think it's about kind of like giving your time to other people, because otherwise you just become that annoying actor at the dinner table who's just always talking about acting and your career. And I'm not like that anymore. That's why I do podcasts instead.
And I'm grateful for it.
Okay,
Hey.
I just have a question about being on the set, or being like a movie set or a TV show set. What was your first impression when first arriving there?
Yeah, like, first time you walk onto set is depending on what job you're on, right? But there is a big difference, unfortunately, between, and some of it makes sense, but there's a big difference between basically whether you're a series regular or a main role versus whether you're a day player. If you're a day player on a show and it's halfway through the season, the crew and the entire system has been working. It's like a well-oiled machine, so everything works quite well, which means that if you're an actor and it's your first day on episode 5 of something out of, say, 8 episodes, or episode 12 out of 20 something, you might feel like you're just being drafted through like on a conveyor belt, because everyone is like, yeah, we've got to do this, we've got to get this done, we've got to get this done, and everyone's doing that. So you can arrive, get put in your costume. I remember having that on a show where I turned up, it was season 7 of the show, and they've all been doing it for 7 years, so they all really know what they're doing. I'm just some guy that's there today. So I rock up and they put me in costume and they said, oh, okay, we're going to have you on set by 12:30. I was like, cool. So I'm just kind of waiting around, and it's just me and the lead of the show waiting around. So I go say hi, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to bother him too much. So I just thought I'd introduce myself, given I'm going to work with him today. And then he was really welcoming. And he was like, did you bring a book? And I was like, no. And he was like, rookie error, should have done that. And I was like, oh, okay. And he just kind of was like, yeah, there's loads of waiting around. And I knew that there would be, but I was like, well, like 20 minutes? He's like, maybe 20 minutes, 20 times over. And just kind of gave me the lowdown on, at least from an actor's perspective, how this stuff can work. And I remember he then went to set to do another scene. I was the only other actor around. So I walked around alone. And I was like, this is really boring and really odd, and is completely opposite from the glamour of movie making as you might imagine it. And I went and talked to some of the SAs. Then some of the other crew were like, actors talking to SAs, this doesn't compute. This isn't the way things normally go. And I was like, so am I meant to go in my trailer and be alone? Is that the job? And I was really confused. Then you compare that to another show where I was one of the leads, and it's a completely different experience because they're catering around you guys because we're creating something from the ground up. And so I think, really what the important thing is you have to make the people who are new and fleeting in their time feel welcome, because otherwise you'll be like a deer trapped in headlights. And I felt like I'd left that set before I really arrived. Like I turned up, did the lines, and I was gone. And I was like, I didn't know if anything works. And it doesn't really matter that I know. But at the same time, it would be nice to feel like I did a good job. It'd be nice to feel like I was part of something. And so that's why, for me, when people, people got flown out to Budapest from all over the world to be in Shadow and Bone, maybe for one scene. And they'd be there for a week, and they wouldn't meet us till, say, the Thursday or the day when they're shooting. So they're just like walking about a foreign city, being like, I don't understand what a Grisha is. Like they have no idea what's going on. And so it's on us as the mainstays, whether you're cast or crew, to go, hey, come join us. Welcome to this thing. Because otherwise you're just turning up and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. And that feeling, until someone welcomes you in, can stay. You could have that feeling all the time. And that's the kind of thing that probably makes people go, you know what, it's not for me. Not because they're not good, not because they're not right for it, just because no one welcomed them in. So yeah, that was my first experience. I got lucky when someone welcomed me in.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I will say there are worse cities than Budapest to be stuck walking around in.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was there for 6 months. I loved it. It was great.
Budapest. Abby, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I had a question about the adaptation of the show from Shadow and Bone, because I feel like there's just a long history of things being adapted from books into movies and TV shows, and people are quite disappointed in the end product. But from what I understand, people are really happy with the adaptation of Shadow and Bone that you guys did. And you said, obviously, a big part of it is about casting and casting the right people for the characters. I was just wondering if you thought that there's any other components that really just make for a good adaptation of a book that the fans are happy with. Oh yeah,
100%, and especially with something like Shadow and Bone, because we're not. It's not adapting. There's a very big difference with like adapting something like Bridgerton to Shadow and Bone, and the problems that you need to solve are quite unique to the novel that you're looking at. Bridgerton has, for instance, I don't want to speak for Bridgerton, I'm not in that, but it has very unique things that it's trying to do in terms of representation, and with it being a period piece and feeling both real at the same time. Whereas Shadow and Bone, we have to build a fantasy world that people, with lots of words that nobody knows if you haven't read the books. And even then, if you've read the books, your pronunciation of said word might be different from everyone else. It's called the Grishaverse. People have been like, no, it's the Grishaverse. And I'm like, look, talk to the author. Like, don't argue with me about that. So there are so many components, because the production design has so much to say. The visual style, which is set by that original director, the costume design does so much. The score, which often comes later, but like I'm a soundtrack like nutcase. So I was just like pestering Eric, our showrunner, being like, what is the soundtrack going to be like? Show me what it's going to be like. And there are so like the casting is really only one aspect of it. The casting is just the only aspect that really speaks for itself, in that, again, like no one's asking us to publicly talk about the minute details in the background of a scene that take hours and hours and hours to get perfected. They're going to talk about the guy who goes click bang with a gun, which is me, because it's an obvious thing. Doesn't mean it's more valuable. It's not more valuable. In my view, all of these different aspects are, completely equal to one another, and also completely replaceable. Like, let's not forget, if I'm not the right fit and I am horrible to people or really bad at my job, I'm replaceable. So, it's such a big effort on everyone's part, and it starts with the writers. At least in television, it really, really starts with the writers. On the whole, it always does. Plays, it's the same. And as much as I'm connected to the writers in terms of what I have to do, I am so many stages down the line before you get to me. You cast me, and in my case of Shadow and Bone, you fly me out in 2 weeks. But they've been writing it for over a year. And they've been doing so many other things. They have to design what the monsters are going to look like. They have to do this and this and that. And I'm waiting to be part of that process. But yeah, to answer your question, everything else, every other department, just as important.
I think it's one of those things too where, you know, no one will, if everyone does their job, no one will be talking about the, you know, minute little thing. But the moment someone screws up, that's the only thing that people will be talking about, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys had it, but there was a TV show over here in the UK for a bit called Movie Mistakes. And it was brilliant. And it was just one of those things where like you'd find the guy who was like the sound guy with the boom on like Pirates of the Caribbean. You'd see his arm and you'd be like, hang on, is there a pirate with a Rolex watch? Like, you know, those things are the only things you notice them because they're wrong. Or you notice it in Friends when like the wall has an edge and you're like, oh, that's not Chandler and Joey's apartment, that's a set. But these things work best when you can't see what the work is. And actually, on some level, that applies to acting as well. You don't want to see me going, oh, I wonder what my line is. You just want to see the character come to life. And so it's everyone is doing that in their own different ways, I think.
Yeah, of course.
Hi. So I have a question about sort of working on set within a scene. I know that even between shots in the same scene, there can be a gap of time when people are like re-rigging lighting and moving the camera for the next shot, that type of thing. I'm curious if you have something that you do, or if there's something that a director has done or another member of the crew to help you sort of stay in the mood of the scene while you're waiting, like the 20 minutes people are rigging things.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So largely with television, you're making a movie or something of movie quality nowadays, but more of it on a TV schedule, right? So you can easily be doing 2 to 3 scenes a day, which means that turnaround is really, really quick. So actually what you need to do in order to stay in it is actually just take a break, is to not do anything, because you're going to be doing it like this all day. So actually what you need is those regimented breaks where you pop out to breathe. You go get yourself some water or some coffee. It's the other times when I was just doing the School for Good and Evil at the kind of beginning of this year in Belfast, which has so many stars attached to it. So I'm already losing my mind because it's Paul Feig directing and it's Charlize Theron and Kerry Washington and Lawrence Fishburne and Michelle Yeoh. And I'm like, I'm involved in all of this. Like, what? And then it's a completely other issue because we did the finale of the movie for over a week, one scene for over a week. So that turnaround ends up being following days. You go, how do I stay in it when I've got to go home and sleep and come back tomorrow morning? And depending on what the shot is, because they could be like, yeah, this stunt sequence, we're probably going to do one take every 25 minutes. Like you end up having to really kind of remember what you did. And luckily, you know, you can go and look at playback and you can talk to continuity and they can kind of sort you out. But you have to really kind of like train your brain to almost be hyper aware of how you're working and go like, oh, okay, this is what the director's trying to do with this. This is what this department needs to achieve. When someone comes over and I'm in it and then they have to go, sorry, your face, blah, blah, blah. Oh, your costume. Oh, we've got to change the battery in your microphone and everyone is touching you. And it's COVID. You've got to just kind of put that stuff to one side and just let yourself be. It's all about sustaining yourself. Like the really obvious things like, you know, drink enough water and all that kind of stuff. But also, I think the better that you know the scene, the better you have an idea of what you're trying to achieve. Because you'll shoot things in bizarre orders, especially if the scene is big and has a lot of components to it. You could easily do like the beginning and the end, and then you have to come back for the middle. And you don't know what the coverage is. You go, okay, one scene, 2 people, talkie, coverage, we'll come in close and then we're done. But if you go, oh wait, there's this detail that's in the stage direction that we've forgotten to look at, you know, that's the stuff that means you have to come back in a couple of months, spend some more money and do reshoots. Like you need to be on the ball. So I think it's just everyone has to really go back to the scripts, the shot list, however it is that whatever your way in is, whatever job you have, and you just have to commit. And I can't believe I've shot one scene for over a week. Like, would have loved that luxury on Shadow and Bone occasionally. Like, there's a couple of bits we got in one take because we just didn't have time. And it's just dependent on each individual job. So you learn the rhythms as you go. And I think the big thing is you just rely on the people around you to get you all through it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your questions. So I don't know if you saw this in my email. I mentioned that I ask everyone who comes on for 5 film recommendations. So
Yeah.
I'm going to get you to share what those are and why you chose them.
Okay. One of them was just something that I kind of kept coming back to. Have any of you seen The Imposter, Stanley Tucci movie? Directed by Stanley Tucci, starring him and Oliver Platt. I thought of it for this. I watched it recently, and I thought of it for this because there are so many films about acting and about filmmaking. And one of the great things about this is about 2 out-of-work actors in the 20s and the shenanigans that they get up to. And the great thing about it is that in the film, you can tell that the actors are in on the joke. You often get films that make fun of actors, but the actors aren't in on the joke. This film is so smart, so clever, and quite wacky. I highly recommend you go watch it immediately because it's so clever. And it also almost feels like a play, and it feels quite theatrical. And you'll know why when you get to the end as well. So watch The Imposters, director Stanley Tucci, and he's a brilliant director. He needs to direct more. That's my number 1. My number 2, I mean, I'm always really excited for, we have all of these kind of big directors that everyone goes like, oh, you've got Tarantino and Nolan, Wes Anderson, and you kind of list off, and just Scorsese and Spielberg and so on. You list off directors in your head, but I really like finding directors that do kind of very, very different things. I mean, I'm really interested to see what Chloe Zhao does with the Eternals with Marvel, because Nomadland doesn't match in my head what I think she would do as a Marvel movie. And I really, really enjoyed that as a watch, because I was like, it's fascinating, the blurring of, at least from an actor's point of view, acting with the real in terms of the cast themselves. I thought that was superbly done. I would also recommend, I mean, this is just one that I can't watch it several times over, but Heart of Darkness. If any of you have seen about the making of Apocalypse Now, obviously watch Apocalypse Now. But having just worked with Lawrence Fishburne, he was telling me about the making of that film. He made that film when he was 14 years old. Crazy. 14. And I was just listening to his stories about it, and I was like, wow, you've lived a life. I wish I could just know everything. And so I rewatched Heart of Darkness, and that film just blew my mind. Just the films about the making of film I find fascinating. And then I would also recommend, I was late to the party, but I just watched Jojo Rabbit. I hadn't seen that, and I've just seen that, and that blew my mind and broke my heart. And then I feel like I should choose something funny, because all of these things have been a bit more serious. Well, no, The Imposters is very funny, but it's the films that you get, like, there's something to be said about films that never fail you. They don't have to be the most high art thing in the world. Like, sometimes we're just making a good piece of entertainment. Like, name me a high art Christmas movie, and I'll watch it, but like largely are like they're comfort movies. You'll go back to Elf, you'll go back to Home Alone, like Home Alone 2, arguably I think even better than the first. I know, controversial, but these comfort movies that always kind of bring you home. For me, Father of the Bride, I don't know why, I just love that movie. I love Steve Martin, and I love Father of the Bride parts 1 and 2. So please, I'm going to claim that as one film. Please go watch all these films, and now you'll get a little insight into how my brain works.
Thank you so much for sharing those. For me, it's Dirty Dancing. I have watched that movie about 1,000 times. It's so good. All right. Well, yeah, thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk about your journey and your process. It's been really insightful, especially because I think, again, there seems to be a little bit more of an emphasis on theater and theater training in the UK. And so I think it's interesting getting that perspective, because the actors that we've talked to thus far have kind of grown up just working in film and TV without a kind of training background. So I think that was really cool to hear about. But thanks so much.
And thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. If you've stayed till the end, thank you so much for watching this special kind of episode that I've shared on my YouTube channel. But if you would like to hear more from other actors or from different members of the film industry, I have the podcast Film Kid Asks, which is available on every major podcast streaming service, and I highly recommend you check it out on Spotify or Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or wherever you like to listen, because we've had so many incredible conversations with some truly phenomenal, talented people, and I would love to share that knowledge with you guys. So go check us out, follow us on Instagram. All of the different social medias and listening platforms will be linked down below if you're interested, and I will see you soon with some more regular kind of Jordan Harvey book content. Bye!